Hi, everybody. Welcome to the podcast Fenced In. And quick introduction from myself and from Chris. Chris, tell us who you are and a little bit about yourself and your finest fencing moment.
Oh, that's a good one. Hi, I'm Chris. I'm a foil fencer from London, and my finest fencing moment, one of two, either winning a bronze medal at the 2018 Commonwealth Fencing Championships, or the moment I found out I got a selection for the GB team, and took half an hour to tell my wife after I got home.
Amazing. So good.
And so Ben, who are you? What have you done? And what's your finest fencing moment?
So my name is Ben Peggs, and I started fencing when I was 10 years old, and I've been doing this now for coming up to 20 years. That is kind of scary. I've been a full-time athlete since I was 16, so full-time for just about 15 or so, 16 or so years. I live in London, and my finest fencing moment would have to be standing on the podium after we won gold at the European Games in Baku 2015. There is something quite pleasurable about hearing your national anthem on the top steps. So, and we just wanted to welcome you to our podcast, Fenced In. Chris being the brainchild of this wonderful thing. And hopefully you might learn some stuff about fencing, but not only fencing as you currently know it, but fencing in quarantine and all things that are training whilst in lockdown.
Definitely. The idea is to bring fencing knowledge and fitness knowledge to anybody that might want it, slightly more fencing focused, but not limited to that, to get quick gains and long-term gains in your game.
And there'll just be a lot of other like chatting rubbish in this as well, I'm sure.
I wouldn't have it any other way. Cool. So we were going to talk a bit about our training and what we're doing in quarantine training, if you can call it that, but ways of continuing forwards, considering we don't know how long any of this is going to last. It might be a while. It might be, originally we thought it might be a few weeks, and I think you probably felt the same as I did, which was, yeah, this isn't going to keep me from fencing. I fenced through what feels like worse.
Yeah, certainly. You mean you've got first-hand experience of going somewhere and being quite short on fencing in general, and I think for most people this is, well, for anybody in any part of their life, this is a huge shake-up and turnaround. So actually, what I quite like is see people being really creative and using their brain and thinking, actually, how can I make this the best possible outcome for me?
Yeah, definitely. And then, so how have you been doing that?
Well, a couple of different things. Like as we know with fencing, or as we don't know actually, there's like quite a few facets to the game. There's like your technical, your tactical, speed, agility, weight training, footwork, stretching, flexibility, and the list goes on. You can subcategorize all of that, but ultimately, we're all missing somebody to hit.
Yeah.
And so the biggest thing I think for certainly you and I have seen a lot on Instagram, and are doing ourselves, is actually setting up like a hitting pad or like a dummy to beat up, because you put a sword in a fencer's hand, how many times, even when they're not on the piece, they're just flicking things and hitting things and just wanting to like use the sword. So I've actually like made myself a dummy that I've stuck on the balcony of my girlfriend's house that I'm beating up. It can't fight back, but it's a lot of fun to hit. How
Yeah,
about you?
no, it looks like good fun. I haven't got one of those. I really like the look of yours. I've seen a few online. I've seen some on Reddit. I was thinking about making one based on your advice, really, to take my jacket and stuff it with some pillows and some cardboard. I don't know how to make it hold a sword or for it to be at the right height, but I'll figure that out.
Yeah, do you know what? It required quite a lot of like tinkering. Basically, I kind of took a fencing jacket, stuffed it with a few pillows, rolled up some towels, shoved those down the sleeves, put some socks in some gloves, and stuck the gloves inside the jacket arms. And then because, as you know Chris, I'm obviously a coach, and so I'm very fortunate to have a coaching jacket that I could put over the top of it. just to make it even nicer to hit. And
Yeah,
so
that's really handy.
yeah, massively. And actually, I've got a chest plate as well, which really makes it feel like a coach. So, and then when I arrived at my girlfriend's for this lockdown, very kindly, her housemate had some like bungees. So I just strapped him to like an old like washing line and stuck him on the balcony, and then got an old broomstick, which I then like again bungeed to the kind of railings of the balcony, and then stuck a sword at the end of it. And so it was perfect. It was like the right height, and it had a sword that I could like hit that was pretty much like tethered down, so it wouldn't move. And yeah, so far it's been really good actually. And you know, I'm kind of working on. I will be as of next week. Kind of working on some technical stuff with him.
With him.
Yeah, I know it's weird, isn't it?
Has he got a name?
Yeah, Lucy keeps saying stop calling it him. It's an it. In fact, actually, the first time I made him, in fact, I nicknamed him Shadow, which makes him sound like a really bad superhero, but we'll go with it.
That's
So
really
the
good.
first time that I made Shadow, I just stuck him in the corner of the room and then went to bed, and then woke up to go to the toilet in the middle of the night and scared the living hell out of myself when this dummy
amazing.
with a mask on top has just sat there. So yeah, that was freaky. That was freaky. But I think it'd be good for you to have a pad that you can kind of do some stuff with, you know?
Yeah, I think probably, and you know, obviously the benefits are, you know, if you've got enough space in your house to really, you know, move a bit and do some lunges, that's obviously really good for distance. But just keeping your hand and your eye in and remembering how to hit. I find with fencing, I started quite late. I kind of did, you know, an hour a week at school when I was 15 for a year, and then stopped for 2 or 3 years. And when I was at uni, I took it really seriously. But I've always found, and always been so slightly afraid of, like I don't know what you call it, but kind of going backwards, you know, like the reverse trajectory, and how quickly you lose. Or I felt like I've kind of lost things in the past. And as I fence for longer, the longer I've been fencing, the harder I take my training, the more seriously I take my training,
Yeah.
the less
No,
I go back, which is really good. So I don't have to be so afraid of that.
Yeah, no, totally. I think you know, for people that are listening, I don't know if they're aware, but Chris and I work together. So you know, Chris is a diligent student and
Ben is
works
a
exceptionally
fantastic
hard.
coach.
Oh well, you know, we can both use this for an ego stroke. To be honest, that would be quite
Yeah,
good.
yeah, that'd be good, wouldn't it? I can
But yeah,
attach my name to yours to get out there a bit.
no, don't be daft, don't be daft. You work incredibly hard, and actually, this is probably one of the reasons why we wanted to do something like this, was to kind of, you know, idea share for everybody out there. And I think that one of the biggest things that I was potentially worried about is that I had a small forearm injury at the beginning of the season, which I've been kind of maintaining. And I was kind of worried about losing strength actually through my forearm, and then potentially coming back from our quarantine lockdown and actually potentially doing myself more damage. Not to mention just the obviously technical work and the timing and point placement. A lot of people think that, you know, it's quite easy just to hit a dummy, and it is really. But if you're able to, I think this is kind of the defining factor between just doing pad work and if you're able to do pad work with a blade attached, because you're able to do beats on the blade, engagements, binds, envelopments, all kinds of different things on the blade. And for the non-fencing listeners, that's, you know, effectively just attacking the blade or moving the blade out the way so you're able to hit the target. It just gives you much more feedback and feel to the blade, which I think is incredibly important. I mean, Chris, when we've done some work together, we've a lot of the time, certainly with the open eyes actions we've been doing, or the kind of the more creeping into distance and seeing what happens, we've been doing that not only with distance but a lot of feel on the blade as well, which I'm guessing you found has been useful for feedback through your blade and what the opponent's doing. Have you found that useful at all?
Yeah, definitely. And actually, the most satisfying moment, and I'm sure you find this as well, you fence a much higher level than I do, but is when it just happens, when you've kind of stopped thinking about it, or you know, your reaction takes over, and suddenly you're like, oh, that happened in my lesson. I remember that. That's great. How did that happen? Oh yeah, because I worked on it.
That's the best feeling.
Yeah, it's really good. And no, absolutely. And I think you know, there's a lot there. Something you told me recently, which I found really helpful. Let's say recently, I think it was maybe a month or two ago, when we were still able to fence.
Yeah.
Is to do footwork with a blade in hand, to practice the coordination, when the foot lands, do the parry, and to just have more of a feel. So you're not just doing fitness up and down in a certain amount of time, which is also useful, but in a different context. But for the kind of work I was looking to try and do, and I've seen you do lots of that as well. I've seen you do that at the Leon Paul Centre, going up and down the strip, and after the session, half an hour of footwork and doing your own bits, which is always really good. Lead by example, which is great.
Oh well, I do try, but I think that, as you said there, kind of having blade in hand is that kind of coordination. And actually, currently in lockdown that we're all experiencing, footwork is one of the main factors that I think most people are struggling to do, because in your house, unless you've got a corridor that's quite long, it's difficult to get the footwork in. I'm very lucky, especially whilst this weather is quite good, to be able to kind of do a bit of that pad work and also be able to move my legs as well. I know I've seen a few people have garages and hanging coaching jackets or just fencing jackets up in a garage and trying to do stuff in there, and that's tricky. I think if there's any way you're able to do your footwork in this lockdown, it's effective. But people think that just if they can't do fencing footwork, they can't do footwork training at all. And ultimately, fencing footwork is just speed agility. It's just the ability to be able to change direction. And I think that if you don't have a lot of space to do footwork, there's no reason why you can't do some like short speed agility based fast feet. There's this great thing that I saw advertised on Instagram the other day, and it's effectively 4 hurdles that all collapse in on each other, and you kind of pop them up like mini fences, and then you kind of just jump over them, or you can lay them flat as well, then use them as like a kind of diamond that you do kind of like fast feet in and out of.
That sounds quite good.
Yeah, it's really clever. And if you are able to get outside and you are able to do some fencing based footwork, that's great. But equally mix it up, because the biggest thing here is you don't want to get bored. We're here for 3 weeks, and then goodness knows what's going to happen after that. It could be another 3 weeks. It could be another 2 months. We don't know. And so you have to change the training up, because the biggest thing, you and I spoke about this, earlier on, was the kind of the mentality side of things about getting bored. And so by being able to go outside and not only do some footwork, but do some speed agility in a diamond or in a small box, just to challenge yourself. And then if you are able to kind of add in some coordination based stuff, so like we spoke about with the footwork, with the blade in hand, if you're struggling to find space to do the fencing foot with blade in hand, or even in some kind of public areas, taking a fencing sword out will scare the life out of anybody around you. I'm very fortunate at where I'm staying at the moment, is there's a squash racket and a squash ball, and so I can go and find a wall outside, do some footwork drills, and throw a ball against the wall. And as I get better, I'll do some footwork drills whilst being able to try and do some racket based actions against the wall, just to be able to have that speed agility, fast feet quickness with some coordination there, which effectively all fencing is. I mean, you must be doing something similar yourself.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet, but you've given me some good ideas. Actually, I hadn't even thought about, I thought about coordination, doing some footwork, but I hadn't thought about rackets or anything. And I was actually just racking my brain to see what we had in the house. And actually, we do have tennis rackets and we've got tennis balls. So I might do something like that. That would be great. And I found, so as you know, last year I went to Cape Town for 3 months, and fencing out there is not the biggest priority, and there are all sorts of issues that mean that fencing isn't always able to happen. So I was sort of able to train once a week when I was going from training 4 times a week, sparring 4 times a week, and training 6 days a week, to sparring once a week maybe.
No lessons as well. That must have been quite tough.
No, that was quite tough. Well, you came out at one point and you very kindly brought your coaching stuff. So we had, I think you stayed with us for about a week, and we had 3 or 4 lessons of an hour each, which was amazing and really, really made a difference actually. But when I was out there, I obviously then had to look at other ways to train. And I think this is really important, because this is the information that I found really hard to come by, which is one of the things I love about you as a coach, is the fact that you have all the knowledge. And for years I was looking for a coach, and I was saying to my coach, kind of, what else can I do? What else can I do to get better? And one of the few things I found to be really helpful, I mean, I quite enjoyed the lessons, but the knowledge was kind of, do less more often, which was really good. But there was nothing more specific in doing fitness or doing conditioning or doing coordination. And so in Cape Town, I really tried to focus on doing a few things. So every day I went for a swim. I was lucky enough to be by a pool, and we had a gym down the road. And when we were on the beach, we were on the beach every day, which was amazing. The beach was about a 5-minute walk. I did stuff that you were just talking about now. Sharp feet, running up and down, sprints, lots of agility. Actually, stuff that I got off of Racing Bowden's
Oh yeah, he's got some
Instagram
great
page.
stuff.
He's really good at putting stuff up. So thank you, Nick, to that.
And you came back like a muscle of a man. You were in great shape. I mean, you were always in good shape anyway. But when you're running up and down the beach, and you're doing. I mean, it's also, as you say, it's amazing to be able to go out and do training when the weather's good. It's quite motivational when the weather's good to do that kind of stuff. It's not very fun when you get up in the morning and it's dark outside and it's hammering it down with rain. You're like, I've got to go for a run.
No, that's true. Although swimming in the rain is quite good. I quite enjoyed that.
Oh, that must be kind of weird. Yeah.
Yeah,
that's
it's a bit funny. It's a bit, you don't really leave the medium you're going through.
God, I tell you what, I'm useless at swimming. My body's just not built for that. I'm just all the wrong proportions. Like, you're meant to have a long torso, right? So you become like the hull of a boat. Well, there's no hull to me. I'm like mainly leg, I think. So I just capsize. I'm rubbish.
You're like the raft that we put together in Scouts.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the bins kept like getting detached and floating away. Yeah,
bits of rope that don't stick together.
Yeah, exactly. Bits of old tire that just don't quite float properly. Oh dear.
No, you're in great shape.
You raise a good point that actually, you'll have to be resilient in your training. What I loved about your kind of experience in Cape Town as an athlete was you went out there and you were creative, you were resourceful, and actually you're really positive about the mental attitude about being out there, which is I'm going to use this to better myself. And you actually came back in incredible shape. I mean, as I say, you were always in good shape, but incredible shape. And you were, the training you were doing out there, the physical stuff, but the discipline. I think that's something that you and I spoke about earlier, which was, you have to look at this kind of quarantine period as something where you can easily drift. You can easily kind of just let days float by without kind of any real plan. And I sent over my training schedule for next week, and you had a look at it. And I mean, what did you think of it when you saw it?
I thought really disciplined, because you're a full-time athlete anyway. I'm not. I have a job and I'm a parent and a husband, but I have lots of freedom. I work from home, so I have time to do certain things. But fencing is your career, basically. So I really I found it very impressive that even in this time, you were taking the approach of, right, well, this is my job. I've still got to keep focused and have certain goals that I want to achieve every day and be creative with certain things. There was lots of stuff on there I thought was really good. What is on there?
It took a lot of time to actually really put that together. And I've been very, very fortunate that both my coaches have helped me kind of put some stuff in place with not only the physical training, but also some of the things that I've decided that I can actually, or I have more time for now. And what amazes me, Chris, is the fact that you are a father and that you are a wonderful husband, or so I'm led to believe. And you
I'm very lucky. I'm very well supported.
You are very well supported, but at the same time, you very well support your family. But equally, by doing that, you're still able to find time for your training and keep yourself very disciplined. And I think that in itself is part of being an athlete, which is the discipline and actually sticking to a routine, sticking to a schedule. And mine is obviously micromanaged. There's half an hour intervals of everything. And I think what, as you said earlier on, is doing a little bit less, but and trying to keep the quality up, not the quantity. I think the biggest mistake a lot of athletes make, especially when they go into full-time training, is the fact that they just try and do 10 times more of everything, when actually what's amazing about being a full-time athlete is that certain things are hugely important, like recovery, and people don't really think about recovery and don't really think about all the extras that go into being a full-time athlete. I mean, for me, and you see my schedule when we're not in quarantine and lockdown, it's pretty busy. I go from being a professional athlete in the morning, training for 4 or 5 hours, and then and when I say 4 or 5 hours, that's not me just slamming my body for 4 or 5 hours. That includes traveling to training, coming back from training, doing stretching, having lunch, all kinds of things. But
yeah, there's lots of variation in there.
Yeah, but it's all built around being an athlete. So I don't kind of go for a 3-hour training session, then wander off down to KFC. So there's looking after nutrition as well, and it
not publicly anyway.
Well, not exactly. Although having said that, one of my students a little while ago did manage to drive past me and take a photo of me nipping in and out of Subway, which they will forever use over my head.
Nothing wrong with Subway. Not that I've been in years, but nothing wrong with Subway.
True, but the copious amounts of barbecue sauce that I have in any sandwich I make are probably not too good. But certainly, I think what was important is that in my day-to-day routine, and that I don't do enough of, is all the extra things that go into being an athlete, which I preach but I don't practice. And so quite a few things are in my schedule as of next week are things like video analysis. I've taken so many videos of myself competing at the World Cups this year, and I haven't really had the time to actually sit down and kind of look at those and reflect on those. And it's
Yeah.
like when I do my point control on the pad work on Tuesday morning, which is when it's scheduled for, what will I be doing in that point session? Will I be working on speed? Will I be working on accuracy? Will I be working on actually trying out some actions which I've never done before? And I think this is the perfect opportunity to be, again, what I say is creative and even exploring different things. The thing is, right now, is everyone's in the same boat, so you're not really losing an advantage. Everybody is struggling to do something, and so use this time to be able to adapt, overcome, but explore different ways of doing things. And I think what I would implore anybody to do is be really curious about training now. Try things out that you've never tried before and see what works for you, because we've got potentially so much time in lockdown, and you've got to stay curious. And most athletes are curious. They never think they know it all. And as much as I appreciate you saying I've got all the knowledge, I still think there's so much more that we all can learn, both of us. And I've been amazed by some of the articles you send me and the things that you've done, that you're continuously pushing my thought process and my knowledge. Is one of the things that I think that you and I spoke about quite a lot was kind of going green in your diet. And you are and
Yeah.
Miranda, actually, your wife is really hot now on nutrition with a meat-free diet.
Yeah, so we're plant-based, which is quite interesting. We actually watched. It was quite funny, actually. So I went to fencing on a Monday night, and Miranda watched Game Changers on Netflix, and I came back, and she said, "God, I think I've gone vegan." I was like, "Really? Like that? That's amazing. I mean, what's happened?" And there was a boiled egg sitting there. She said, "You're going to have to eat that." I said, "Okay, sure, I'll eat it. I might watch on this thing as well," because she was saying you have to, which is so amazing.
Sure.
And I think it was like 11 o'clock at night, and I thought I won't watch all of it. It's too late. I need to go to bed. Anyway, turned it on. Next thing I knew, it was kind of 1 a.m. I watched the whole thing. It was so gripping, and I was like, I'm vegan. This is,
Yeah.
it's so. It was for me in that moment. It was so clear, and it's obviously not a complete transition or gain in knowledge. There's lots of learning. I've watched lots of YouTube videos. I've read lots of stuff online. You've got to understand how you eat to maintain your muscle mass and everything, which I think is really important, and also how you're eating the right stuff. And something I found so far is you do have to eat more, because there are fewer calories in what you eat, so you end up eating much more. And I think this ties in with something you mentioned before, discipline and going to training. Something that my wife and other people have asked me as well, which I'm sure people have asked you, is kind of, especially when you train in the evening, because you mostly train in the morning, don't you?
Yeah, and then coach in the evenings. Yeah, so I kind of get a little bit of both. But yeah, I mainly train my own training done in the day.
Yeah. So I suppose probably it applies much more to the morning as well. But people saying, how do you have the motivation to go? And I suppose for me, it's not even a question. It's just, I just get up and go. I suppose one answer is I like to eat, but and I'm sure you do as well. I think we all eat a lot, but the real,
Sure.
it's really, there's no question about it. You just go. You just go. I know what training I'm doing. I know what I need to do, how much I need to do. This is one of those boxes being ticked.
Yeah, and that's it, isn't it? I think that people talk about talent, and I hate the idea of talking about talent, because I feel it's a very exclusive thing. Unfortunately, sport is a very exclusive thing, but I think talent is mainly, thrown around a little bit as, oh, that guy's really quick, or that guy's really agile. And it's like, well, actually, there are more attributes to being talented than all of those. And I think, determination and resourcefulness and drive are all signs of being talented. I think there's a lot of mentality that can be attributed to talent, and vice versa. So this is why this moment in lockdown and kind of being stuck in house is a real test of people's determination, because it's really easy, isn't it? And I'm sure having said you just watched a great Netflix program, it is also really easy to then go, well, do you know what? I'm just going to sit on the sofa for a few weeks and watch loads of Netflix and catch up on that. And that's really easy to do. And actually, do you know what? I remember being a teenager when I first went in full-time training, and I used to come back from training every day and then crash in front of the sofa and just put movie on after movie on. I had my dad coming home one day and said, "How was training?" I said, "Yeah, it was great, Dad." And he said, "What are you doing now?" So I'm just watching some movies. He's like, "Well, you've got more time. You got the rest of the day." And I said, "Yeah, well, I'm done." He's like, "Are you done? Are you finished for the day? You're not training 3 hours. A lot of people at work have got to do things." And I suddenly realised as I got older that actually, a sportsman's time is never done. And so I'm not saying that you should always be doing something because that exhausts you, but even the idea of like active recovery or even recovery can still be like managed really well. And
Yeah,
you know
definitely.
I think you and I have certainly, probably, as I'm sure the viewers will know, or not know actually, that we are aging athletes. I'm about to have my 30th birthday in October, and by then I really hope we're out of quarantine.
I'm
Uh,
before you. Mine's in quarantine.
oh no, of course it
Yeah,
is. Oh my
mine,
God, yeah.
mine's April. I think
Oh
quarantine
mate.
ends. Well, I'd say quarantine. We're still allowed out, but quarantine ends like 3 days after.
Oh no. Well, I'm gonna have to FaceTime you, and we'll sing happy birthday. We'll make a cake. I'll get Lucy to make a cake. That's what we'll do.
Okay, that's amazing. I can blow out the
And
candles via Skype.
that's it. That's it. And yeah, and I'll put it out just as you blow. It'll be brilliant. We'll do that.
Exactly. I was just going to say one of the good things is I was meant to be competing the day after my birthday. So
What event was
that
that?
Birmingham.
Oh, Birmingham. Of course, the
Birmingham
Birmingham
was the
Open.
day after my birthday. So the idea was that I was going to have to be up there, be there the night before, and only because I'm kind of pushing so hard and trying so hard was was that going to be the way?
Oh no.
I shouldn't say
But
that,
that,
but
but
only because
it's
I'm
all.
so passionate that I really love fencing that was going to be the way.
Mate, I know exactly, Phil. To be honest though, I remember having my birthday when I can't remember how old I was. I think I was still a cadet. It was my birthday, and I had the Eden Cup. And then it was my day of my birthday, and I was doing the Eden Cup, and
No way.
I got cut. I was absolutely gutted. Absolutely. I mean, I was still a cadet in a junior event, so it wasn't one of my first years. But that was absolutely gutting. It was the worst birthday ever. I got to do the thing I loved, and I really didn't do very well that day, so I felt gutted. But
Oh,
we'll
I
bounce
bet
back.
that was really annoying. Sorry,
Uh,
you were going to make a point about aging athletes.
oh yeah, I was, yeah. Sorry. So as older athletes, talking about recovery, actually, that was it. And this is again a great time. Like we've um, so this week, just because I decided to take 2 weeks break, actually, because I don't know, for many of you who don't know, I was actually out in America, ready to compete at the last one of the last Olympic qualifier of the season,
Yeah, of course.
and then unfortunately, whilst in America, it got cancelled, so I had to fly home. But
But
there was
the day
always
before the
intended.
event.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, yeah, it was.
Yeah,
It was
that's
really
crazy.
rough. It was pretty tough. I remember texting you while I was out there, and kind of you and I were talking about it, and all the things the FI might do or might not do, and etc. So it was tricky. But going back to my aging athletes thing, I flew back, and I always knew there was going to be a long gap between what was Anaheim and the next one of St. Petersburg, and so I intended to take 2 weeks rest anyway, and so this has made it easy because I think the one thing that I'm not particularly good at is doing my rest and recovery. I'm also not very good at not training. That sounds really self-righteous, but as I've got older, I've really learned to enjoy training. I think a lot of young people that I've seen always kind of ego measure at training, and so training always becomes a measurement of like how good they are in comparison to everybody else in the room. And actually, it doesn't matter if you're king of training or not, or queen of training for that matter. It's actually about trying to reach your own personal goals and standards within training, and that's kind of really helped me enjoy training more as I've got older. And that
Okay.
that's something we've spoken about, you and I, psychologically, about trying to keep within the parameters of your own measurement of your own goals, not in comparison to others. And so it's kind of when you really enjoy training, it's hard to stop. And sometimes I don't really recognize when I've potentially overdone it. But that being said, I've had 2 weeks off, and even towards the end of this week, I'm getting a bit antsy. I feel fully recovered, and I want to go outside, and I'm like a caged up dog. And so I've just been going out for some light jogs and stuff like that, but really focusing actually on my stretching, my recovery, actually my coach has sent me a really nice morning routine of waking up and almost doing some kind of yoga stretching in the morning, which has been really, really lovely. Kind of
Oh
opening
yeah,
the body
that's
up.
great.
It's such a good feeling. And you know, kind of speaking of that recovery, it's not only physical recovery, it's kind of that mental recovery. So certainly you and I have spoken at quite a lot of length. In fact, actually, somebody else I coach that's we're quite good friends with is a guy called John, and him and I talk at length about kind of the mental side of things, not only in fencing but day to day. And
Yeah,
so
you're
these are
you're both
really,
very good at that. You've both got minds that go much quicker than mine.
well,
And
I don't know. I
you
think
like to
maybe we go
wander
too
into like the
fast.
little corners of a room.
Yeah, you'll have to see us just chatting and trying to philosophize the brain, but it's always a good chat with John, and it's kind of looking for that mental recovery and getting that time to decompress a little bit, because people don't really understand that. And sometimes you can be fencing and feeling really good, but actually not performing very well, and that can be that kind of mental burnout. You're not giving yourself enough time to emotionally recover. And so, you know, it's something I've worked quite hard on. And again, right now, I've got more time to focus on being really disciplined with my Headspace app that I do regularly. In fact, the other day I had a meeting with my sports psych, and I've run some ideas by him. And the great thing about this whole lockdown is it just gives you more time to really perfect the actual culture of being an athlete, and really getting the methodology of being an athlete right. It's really easy to go into training and be exhausted and kind of just do a little jog and then throw your kit on and go, oh, just make this quick session today because I'm tired. Not do the proper cool down, all that kind of stuff. Whereas
Yeah, definitely.
now I've got a lot more time to do these kind of things, and I can focus on adding in new recovery things. You know, trying out new types of foam rollers, because my girlfriend has a different one, so I can use that. She's got this horrible torture device for your foot, which I've been using, and
What is that?
it's this ball, and it's got lots of knobbles on it, and it really hurts.
It's not like a yellow spiky ball.
It's a blue spiky ball. Yeah, it's
It's a blue
horrible.
spiky ball. I've got a
It's a
yellow
blue
one.
spiky ball.
I've got two
Oh
yellow
yeah,
ones.
they're evil. In fact, actually, one of my coaches, Graham, and you know Graham very well. He's got all kinds of torture devices. Well, they've seen that massive foam roller thing he's got. It's so spiky.
Oh yeah, I think I have, but it's like, I mean, it must be like 4 foot wide.
Yeah, it's like a mace. It looks like a weapon. It's
Yeah,
terrible, that thing.
it's awful. Do you know? So with the yellow balls, because I had two of them, and then I didn't really know what to do with them. They were kind of just lying around the house. So when I used to work from home, what I do is be sitting at my desk and then just kind of be wheeling my feet up and over them
Oh
for,
yeah, yeah,
for
it's a
like
great
10 minutes
idea.
at a time. But you know, it felt really good.
Well, actually, that's the thing. Is it's amazing how stretching can actually really help you mentally unwind from the activity you've just been doing. I suppose, you know, what I'm trying to say is, at the moment in time in lockdown, be creative with your training and do everything you would do normally, but try and find different ways to do it. I think the one of the things that's important is trying to focus on the mentality, because that's something none of us do enough, really. But there's something that I think you and I have spoken a lot about is weight training. And weight training is obviously important because fences are getting stronger, more powerful, and obviously that complements speed and endurance as well. And I think this is potentially the biggest factor that people will find challenging at home. You know, we've spoken about the kind of the technical work, you know, kind of setting up an old coaching jacket and just hitting that and stuff. We've spoken about tactical, you know, doing some video analysis, sitting down, going on YouTube, looking at top fences. We've spoken about speed agility. We can all go out once a day. We can all go to the park. You know, even in speed agility, we can do endurance. I mean, you've just gone and ordered a spinning bike, haven't you? Which is really useful. You've been enjoying that quite a lot, actually.
Yeah, it's really good. We've got it set up downstairs, basically by the front door because there's no other space for it. But we've got that. I've got an ab wheel you gave me as a Christmas
Oh
present.
yeah. How is that? Is that all
um,
right?
it- yeah, it's not bad. It's not bad. I've got a 16K kettlebell that I find really handy.
Oh, that's really good. That's
Yeah, that's
really
good.
good.
I've got my resistance bands as well.
Nice.
But you've mentioned something I haven't got uh, written down as one of kind of areas for improvement. So because this is basically the way I look at this is basically now like a bit of a preseason again. You know, our
Yeah,
season's
for
kind of been
sure.
thrown upside down, and suddenly we have kind of preseason. You know, when I count preseason as kind of like a 6 week period, I try and break up my training into like 6 week blocks. Is
Yeah,
that?
that's
Would you
good.
agree with
That's
that?
smart. Yeah, well, the thing is, your body starts to get used to a routine after a certain amount of time, and it's quite easy to get stale on a routine. So and also it's good for the mentality to just change things up. And after a while, you want to change your routine because hopefully your weaknesses have become strengths, and you want to then work on another weakness.
Yeah, definitely. And also, I think again, you're the full time athlete. I'm only really part time. So my understanding is that really it's quite hard to work on a bunch of different stuff at the same time, and the different areas that. So again, when I was in Cape Town, the stuff I analysed, I broke training down into one of 6 areas, but actually I think there are 7 with you talking about tactical,
Mm-mm.
which I put down as footwork, strength and conditioning, agility,
Sure.
technique, mobility, fitness, and we'll tactical I'll put in there as well. So that's 7. And my
Mm.
understanding is that you can kind of work on 1 or maybe 2 of those for kind of improvement in a 6-week period.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah, for sure.
yeah, is that what you
I
think?
think, yeah, you're right because it's very hard. Also, it's quite disconcerting to be working on many areas at one in one go. You kind of lose the wood from the trees, really. I find that the best kind of approach is more of a sniper kind of approach rather than a shotgun effect. You want to look to pinpoint certain things you want to develop, because it's better for your mindset. You can start to see that thing develop. Whereas if you want to try and work on, for example, let's use, you want to work on your footwork. You also want to work on, I don't know, your blade control, as well as doing your cardio work that you feel that you could improve on, and your psych, for example. You can't concentrate on all those things when you're on the piste. You want to move more in order to make yourself more exhausted to hopefully improve your endurance, whilst doing really small and very acute steps to be more agile on the piece, whilst trying to keep your point control a bit smaller and be thinking a certain way. It's really difficult to manage all those things. I know recently is one of the things I've been working on is from a psychological point of view is being able to consolidate a lead, and when you have a lead, be able to see that fight out. Because at training, when you take a lead, in a fight, sometimes you then want to try different things out. Not always from 0-0. You can
No,
want to try things
absolutely. But
out.
that instinct can take over at the wrong moment. You could
Oh,
be kind of like
completely.
9-6 up, and you go, "This is great. Okay, I can try some stuff out." And suddenly you're 3 hits down, and you're like, "Hang on, what happened there?"
Yeah, completely. And that's both psychological and sometimes also training based. Is that, ultimately we're in a fighting sport, we're in a combat sport, and you want to be fighting, you want to be at training, and you want to be able to deliver a strong fight. And look, we all want to win. And I think that's important, that you don't kind of deny yourself that winning spirit at training. But at the same time, we are human beings that don't have to think like an animal. It doesn't have to be about the ego. If you're trying to win to be king of training, but you're in it for the wrong reasons. If you want to win based on using good footwork and good tactical analysis of the fight, then that's something different. You're setting yourself different goals. And so one of the things I was working on is trying to consolidate that lead. When you take a lead, is to try and see that out right to the very end, rather than kind of going, oh, well, I'm going to try this, I'm going to try that, because that became a habit in training where I always wanted to try something new and different. And then in competition, when it came to the crunch, when, being 12-8 up, you want to deliver those final 3 touches, that kind of firepower might not be there. The kind of mind wanders a bit. So that was something I was working on. And so you're right. It's something that you want to pinpoint rather than shotgun effect. Don't go, I'm going to work on 5 different things, because your brain just can't take that much, and your motivation can't take that much as well.
Yeah,
Um,
and so you mentioned you've been working on that. Do you find so different periods before a competition, you'll allow yourself kind of more play in your focus and your kind of training bouts, and the closer you get to competition, the more killer instinct you want to have to be able to shut down those fights.
Yeah, sure. As you get closer to competition, the whole idea of tapering. I don't think many people understand tapering, and I think it's quite important to kind of understand what you're trying to get out of that. And I think before competition, you don't want to be overdoing it at all. Again, execute quality, not quantity. So you're going in doing much fewer fights, much fewer volume, and really working on playing your best game. I think that's hugely important. I think that if you looked at a full training week for me versus a taper week, you'd see massive difference in volume, in the amount of days training, and recovery is so much more important. Doing way more recovery, lots more stretching, even longer sleeping hours, that kind of stuff, just to really go into the competition feeling, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, is hugely important. But actually, speaking about tapering, and one of the things that I think people get wrong is going back to weight training, which in quarantine is particularly difficult. Is that I don't lift a week before a competition, because doing any form of weightlifting changes your nervous system massively, and if you're trying to do a technical sport with a nervous system change, it takes time for that to implement and build. And so if you're doing that too close to a competition, you will fry your nervous system and not be able to execute the intricate, detailed actions that is fencing. But if I take it back to what are we doing now, which is a bit more volume based stuff, like you said, you're hitting the bike really hard, you're doing a lot of endurance and stuff like that to increase your cardio. You can obviously be doing weight training there, but in quarantine that's really tough. And what I've been really impressed by is people, again, even kids at the club, coming out and being resourceful and showing ways of lifting weight at home in order to do some kind of weight training session. So, for example, getting a bucket, filling out with water and doing a front squat with it. You've got a 16 kg kettlebell, which is great. But even little things like taking a actually I saw Dom de Almeida, one of the guys on the team. He took a bar, like a stick, like a broomstick, put it across his back,
right.
took two like rucksacks, filled them full of all of his books from university, and was doing squats with that.
I
It's
love
great.
that. That's amazing.
It's brilliant, isn't it? Even taking like the water bottles that you get, the big kind of, even you go down to Tesco's or to your local
Oh yeah, the 5 liters.
supermarket. Yeah, get the 5 liters, fill those up, and you can do reverse flies there. You can work on your upper back. It's about, again, being creative. See this as an opportunity in lockdown to be creative. I think the biggest thing is people are going to find that after 3 weeks, going to get bored of sitting around. Don't sit around. Do some training. And if you're not training, you're recovering. Think of ways to train better. Think of ways to learn how to do things better. I've actually brought a couple of fencing books over with me that I'm reading, some psych books that I'm reading as well. Got YouTube up on the go so I can watch some fencing. Of course, we all need escapism from it, but
Yeah, of course.
I'm in a very different position to a lot of people, which is, I do train full time, but for you, you are somebody that is really enthusiastic about fencing, and you are training, almost professionally yourself. The amount of things that you are doing is incredible for somebody that basically has a full-time job. And it always amazes me how much you're able to do, given the fact that, you do have those time constraints of having a job.
Well, I always look at what Ben's doing and try and copy.
Well, yeah, but I think we all copy from somebody, and that's why I kind of talk about knowledge is kind of never ending, which is you've got to look and actually at other people and see what they're doing. And there was a great video today that you mentioned earlier on with Chupanich putting his fencing bag up next to his door and putting a jacket on and a mask and even a foil.
Was that a bag?
Yeah, it was a fencing bag. And
Oh, I didn't know that. I thought he'd padded it. I loved it. I loved they shook hands with it at the end. So,
I know.
Thank you, Cherry.
Yeah, pretending it's Cherry. It was great. It was really good. So little things like that, be creative, look for new opportunities, and you're Chris. You're someone that's a designer by trade, and so all of these ideas must be flowing out of you.
Well, not so much. There are lots of designers' inspiration, which is basically copying what other people do. But
That's it.
But so you train full time, which is amazing, and I mean, obviously you don't just automatically have the time to do all this stuff, but you make time and you find time, which is great. But lots of people don't have that time, and lots of people are really passionate about fencing, and they become fencers first and kind of athletic second. And so there are lots of, I think, picking any of these 7 areas, I'm going to call them the golden 7 areas. There might be more that we've missed out on, I'm sure we'll add to. But picking any one of these and kind of, depending on what their level of training is, kind of incorporating those in, whether it's just a bit of stretching, 5 or 10 minutes of stretching every day, or doing a few body weight exercises at home every day, or finding a way to kind of do some slightly heavier gym work every day. Interesting. So you mentioned a week before competition, you don't do any heavy lifting. I found that a week for me is not long enough. So for me, it has to be kind of closer to 3 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
I won't do any heavy lifting, and then I can kind of, my sparring will then kind of, the feeling will come back a bit more. But but going back to the golden seven, if people go for a run, it doesn't have to be a really
Yeah,
fast run, but I find I do 5K in about 20 minutes, and that sometimes varies. It goes up and down a bit,
sure.
but I find that really helpful. You mentioned that going running gives you some headspace, but I find it just kind of helps loosen things up a bit, especially if
Mm.
you've been doing lots of workouts. Just it just keeps things, it make it less static, if that makes sense. It kind of it frees your muscles up a bit. I'm not
Completely.
talking scientifically, but but any of these things, you know, doing any of these things for most people will be a big gain. Um,
I think it's
and
important to know what works for you as well. There is a lot of science
oh
behind
yeah,
training, and it is really important to understand the science. And you know, I've been very fortunate to have been part of the world class program where we got a lot of information given our way. But still, you have to do what feels right because ultimately, when you feel good, you perform well. And you know, the idea of what I love is the fact that when we're fencing, we spend all day running around in what is a glorified spacesuit, right? And actually to be able to,
I like that.
yeah, and to actually get out and have a little jog in the fresh air, just wearing shorts and a t-shirt, it's such a freeing feeling, and those kind of things make me feel good. And as you said, like getting headspace, it kind of is a bit of escapism. And actually, while we only get one kind of outdoorsy bit a day, you might as well make the most of that. Go for a run, and because ultimately, if you're going to be sitting there at club in the evening doing 3 hours of sparring, you might as well go for a half an hour run, or even go for a half an hour jog to a park, and then do a sprint session in the park, and then jog back. And the whole thing might take you an hour, but you've done a warm up, you've done a run, you've done some sprints, maybe some mobility in the park, you've run back. That's an hour. That's an
Yeah,
hour
that's
of
brilliant.
training done, and then you get in and. You can jump on the foam roller and these other torturous devices you can make. Actually, for those of you that want to make a torturous device, get two tennis balls and tape them together so it looks like a peanut. That's really good at running up and down your back. So your spine almost sits in that little U that is the peanut, and the two bulging areas, which are the tennis balls, then massage your back. That's really good. And if you can find an old broom handle, and if you're able to find a way to kind of put some handles on at the end, you can almost use that like a rolling pin for like a hand roller. So there's lots of different things that you can do,
Hey,
and then
that's really good. I like that.
it's clever, right? And you get in, you've done that, you've done your kind of your run and your bit of mobility and some sprints. You've got in, you're gonna do your cool down, and then you've got time to cook. You've got time to explore different food options. Actually, Lucy's housemate, who I'm staying with, he's vegan, and tonight he made an absolutely fantastic vegan dish, and so we were enjoying that, and that was really lovely, and it was great to try some new dishes, and it's great to be able to. I've got a really great book on food for athletes, written by Ainsley Harriott, and just explore that and do some cooking. We have time now, and then after you've done that, sit down, watch some fencing. Who do you like? Who do you fence like? Who impresses you? Watch that. Write some notes down, and then the next day you get on the pad and you try out some things that one of your top or favorite fencers does, and then you might do a core session, and then you might go outside and get a couple of water bottles and do some kind of weighted exercises with those. It's about looking for the enjoyment and be curious in the training right now, because this is going to last a while and you have to adapt to these changing situations.
Yeah, definitely. And I think being able to prioritize that time, say, you've got your hour outside, you've got to be able to prioritize and know what you're wanting to get. You might need to go to the shops, you might need to go to the post office, might need to do whatever. But you mentioned kind of doing mobility in the park or something as well. Um, I've got an agility ladder as
Oh
well
yeah.
that I found just over the years. I'm sure, like you, I've just kind of collected all this stuff that at one point or another I've gone, hey, that could be really useful. I'll get that. And before you know it, you look down and you're like, oh, I've got a home gym here.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but that's really handy, just for doing some quick feet on the ladder, doing a bit of footwork. As you don't even need that. You can kind of run between two trees. You can, a bit like
Yeah,
with shuttle runs
completely.
or something.
Use the lines on the pavement. Use those. You got everything that's at your disposal. The other thing that because I do a lot of work with the wheelchair guys, as you know, and really enjoy working with those lads. And they are hugely resourceful athletes. They've had to be for most of their life. And one of the things that I learned from Italy, which I took back and showed them, which I think they really enjoyed, a lot of people have seen the idea of fencing with weights or using like a weight jacket. A weight jacket's really good because it kind of puts the weight in the center of your body, and can really actually push you. And I'm talking generally about training now rather than being in quarantine. But one mistake people make is putting wrist weights on. The problem with wrist weights is that when you take the wrist weights off, then when you start fencing, your point control goes out the window because you've changed the pivot point, you've changed the weight of where the almost the angle of the blade. So try avoid using wrist weights. And actually, one thing that I discovered in Italy, which was great to see, actually, it was Aspromonte's coach that I saw do this, and it was fantastic. He effectively took a bit of hose pipe, which he cut the same length of the blade, and then he put it over the blade like a sheath, and it actually made the blade heavier. But it didn't just put the weight in one particular area; it distributed the weight over the length of the blade. So effectively, Aspromonte was taking lessons with a heavy blade, and it was really great to see because he hadn't just changed it to a whole new blade that's just heavier. He was able to use the current forward that he liked. He made it heavier and could make 10 minutes of touches like that, then take the hose pipe sleeve off the blade and then deliver another 10 minutes of touches on the jacket and be able to give himself effectively a weighted session but with point control without losing the dexterity of the point itself.
That's amazing. I never would have thought to do that. That's really valuable piece of information. And interesting what you mentioned on a weighted jacket as well. I was wondering about that at one point, and then I got some guidance to say it might not help as much as I wanted it to. But it's interesting to hear these different perspectives because this is the kind of information I was always searching for. And actually, I didn't know about weighted jackets until I saw, Graham, your coach, as I don't know if he's always had one or kind of gets some of his pupils to wear them, but I've seen previous pupils of his wear them and find them really useful. I don't know if you've ever worn one, but I've seen David wear them before.
No,
And I know he believed in them quite well. And I don't know if you've got an oxygen mask and as well, but I don't know if you've ever used a weighted jacket.
Yeah, sure. No, I have done actually. They're really good. The only thing you have to be careful of is the impact on the front knee. It becomes a little bit harder. But then, if you maintain your recovery and you're not using it every single day, you're obviously trying to periodize that training a bit. They should be fine. For those that train with me on a regular basis, you've seen me walking around like Bane with my altitude mask on. The jury's out on that really. There's a lot of research to support it and a lot that damns it. But I'll tell you what, try sticking one of those on and doing a footwork session with it. It's not nice. Even if it's just placebo, it's incredible. I mean, I don't think it is. You try restricting your oxygen and doing, half an hour, pretty hard footwork session. I know that it works, but how it feels. But all these different techniques and training ideas, they can all be used. And actually, you know what? Like, okay, you might not get your hands on an oxygen mask up here, but go out on a nice sunny day, go and find a hill somewhere and do some hill sprints. That will work you twice as hard. And it's just being resourceful,
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think that's probably a good place to stop unless you have other stuff you want to mention.
No, I think that's great. And Chris, I think it's what we're trying to do here. Chris came to me with the idea of starting a podcast, and I loved the idea. At first, I was worried I wouldn't have enough time, but what's amazing about the situation is we now have plenty of time. As much as it's not a situation
You've been
we want
given
to
the
find
gift.
exactly, and it was such a fantastic idea by Chris, and it was something that I absolutely wanted to grab with both hands, but didn't know if I could do it. And actually, you know what? Chris has very kindly done most of the donkey work on this, and he's has a thirst for knowledge in fencing, and it's always great having a discussion. And we often find ourselves talking at length, and so I think you were really excited to try and get this out on a podcast.
Yeah, definitely. Well, also, how many times have you been at a club and trying to talk to somebody and you get all of 30 seconds or you get about 4 minutes in between saying, "En garde prêt, allez." It's quite nice to be able to talk about, I don't
Yes.
think we've had an hour's conversation for a long time.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're absolutely right. And even when we're having a lesson, it's working on your specific things, but we never really tend to talk on more generic things about fencing. And also, I mean, this has been very fencing specific, but ultimately, we'd like to try and make this a bit broader for anybody that wants to kind of understand more about fencing and fencing training, especially in kind of like quarantine. Hence the name Fenced In, which we played with a couple of different names, but we all feel a bit fenced in at the moment. So it's about kind of trying to use that positivity in the best way possible. And what's great about working with Chris is that he, as I say, he's got that for knowledge. He wants to understand more, and he's prepared to absolutely dedicate himself. And it's working with him as a student has been so much fun and really enlightening. And actually, we set a goal, didn't we, to qualify you for the Commonwealths in 2018. And he didn't only qualify for the thing; he came back with a medal. So, if anybody understands about periodizing training and getting themselves in shape for big events, that is Chris, and you're certainly in safe hands here.
Well, that's very nice. But I find, again, I find looking around me and seeing what other people do to be amazing. At the Commonwealths, it was amazing to see, some of the Australian fencers and how they fence. They were much more upright than I am, and lots of the fencers I've seen, and it's just amazing to be able to see different fencers at different levels and kind of what that means. Which is why I've been to one World Cup and I've been to lots of satellites, but every year the satellite season comes around. It's amazing to be able to go and see what people are doing and why they get further than I do, and kind of the ones that win and I'm sure you get to see that all the time, but being able to see what you do and the other guys do at the national centre as well, it's really good again, and what we want people to be able to have, without really struggling to find it. There's lots of information on Reddit now, there's stuff on YouTube, there's stuff on other places on the internet, but it'd be quite good if there was a kind of more centralized area, where some of this information could be, and it could all exist in one place. Not that we're, it's quite hard to do that. I'm sure those things exist in fencing books that I've never really read. But
absolutely. But at the same time, what I like is that ultimately having a conversation and just talking about all these things and sharing ideas is sometimes how you learn the most. Sometimes if you feel you have to sit down and kind of bury your nose in a book, it can be hard. But actually, what's lovely about podcasts or anything that you can listen to, that's one of the biggest things that I find, driving around and going from training session to training session or from coaching session to whatever, that I don't get much time to read anymore. And so having the idea of listening to a podcast and listening to people talk and discuss and having it more of a kind of open dialogue, not only keeps it a bit more relaxed, and it's easy to do on the move. You can hopefully stick us on an iPod or an iPad or an iPhone and kind of learn some stuff on the way, and maybe have a giggle every now and then. And maybe currently not now because we're all stuck at home, but you can be hopefully cooking yourself something or doing a nice cool down session, or even going for your one exercise a day and just stick us on in some headphones, and hopefully you might learn something. We originally intended this podcast to be like 20 minutes long, and I knew that after a lot of the conversations that Chris and I often have, this was going to be way longer than 20 minutes. So we will try and make the next ones more succinct. But welcome to our pilot, which is Fenced In, and don't go too stir crazy at home. Be curious, get training hard, and most of all, enjoy it.
Thanks for letting us take up so much of your time. Until next time.